Hello there and welcome to another video, and this video is a series of reviews dedicated to the Jackass movies. Not all of them, as 4.5 hasn't been released yet, so I can't really make a formal judgment on it, but I will be going through Jackass 1, 2, 3, 4, and the .5s, as well as Bad Grandpa and Bad Grandpa .5. Simply put, I just felt like doing it. I felt like giving my own personal thoughts on the Jackass movies. I've gone through all of them. I've rewatched them, I should say. And so I just really want to give my own personal thoughts. This isn't scripted in any way. This is very spontaneous, as you can probably tell already by this introduction. Now, you may be wondering, if you have been a long-time viewer, that yes, I have done a Jackass review before. I did one on the first movie, and if I'm perfectly honest, I do not like a lot of my older videos. I really hate them a lot, especially the ones where I'm physically appearing in them. So this is hopefully going to be a lot better. Not by much, but hopefully it's going to be a lot better. Anyway, let's start the review, shall we? So, of course, Jackass the movie is the first of the movies, and a lot of what I said back in, I think it was 2017, is more or less going to stay the same. For me, this is a movie that feels very much like it's a continuation of the series, i.e. it feels like basically a 90-minute special for the TV series. It doesn't feel as unique or, dare I say, special as, say, the other movies. It's definitely by far the weakest of the mainstream Jackass movies, or at least it is in my opinion. All the other Jackass movies always seem to up the ante. This one obviously is the first movie, and it's very telling that they didn't really know what they were doing. They have admitted in the past, Jeff Tremaine and, of course, Steve-O, on various podcasts and various interviews, and also the .5s, that the first Jackass film, they really were just throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks. They didn't really know what they were doing. They didn't really prepare that well, and everything was very much spontaneous and just go with the flow. And it's very telling in this, and obviously at the time this was a huge success. This is why you then ended up getting the other movies. This is why you got Wild Boys. This is why you got the video game, etc., etc. However, in my opinion, this is definitely outdated by, unfortunately, the sequels. The sequels are far better, and this one feels very much outdated and doesn't feel as memorable as the others. That's not to say that it's bad. It is still enjoyable in its own right, and there are some great stunts and great skits in it. For example, I really love the golf cart stunt. It's the one where, Knoxville was almost killed, but I think it's an amazing one. I think the first stunt with the rent-a-car crash-up derby, I think that's also quite a funny introduction, a brilliant way of setting the scenes, if that makes sense. But overall, this film feels very safe. It doesn't really go to any extreme lengths. It feels very safe. And it's very telling while rewatching this film that it isn't as funny or as enjoyable as the late ones. One of the things I did when I was rewatching it, with other people, and this one had the fewer laughs compared to the sequels. Like, this one had the fewest. It just, for example, they have a lot of segments set in Japan because basically they filmed in Japan for some of the movie, and almost none of the segments in Japan work. All of them are kind of boring. They're kind of dull. I think the wasabi, snorting was probably the best skit out of all of them, but maybe the fireworks out of the ass and on the penis, that one worked as well. But aside from that, a lot of them didn't really work. And like I said, it feels like a continuation of the TV series. And that's not to say the TV series is bad, but the TV series is nowhere near compared to, say, the movies. And instead of re-upping the ante, it feels very much like they're just continuing the TV series. And it's even telling, even on the deleted scenes, on the deleted sketches, just how dull a lot of these ideas were. They're not very imaginative, and the film ends really abruptly. It ends with Knoxville just being chucked into the river, and Rick Taylor throwing his confetti about and saying this is the end and all that, and that's how it ends. It just ends like that. there's no real build-up. I mean, the last major stunt, I guess you could say, is the cut up the ass, which is admittedly hilarious, but it is definitely an abrupt ending, and it's kind of showing the signs of like how unprepared they were while making this film. And of course, behind the scenes, they did admit later on that they really were just hoping everything sticks, and it just wasn't all there. But like I said, it was a success, and it was successful enough to continue the series, if that makes sense, or continue the film series and create Wild Boys, etc., etc. It was a massive success. So I guess if you have it in the mindset of at the time, it would have been really, really good. But of course, the problem is we've seen all the other Jackass films. This is definitely outdated by this point. For me, it's by far the weakest of the mainstream Jackass movies. I think, it doesn't have as much memorable moments, and the ones that are mostly in the first half of the film. The second half of the film has completely forgettable moments. I mean, sure, there is the cut up the ass, and there is one stunt which I refuse to rewatch. Even when I was rewatching all the films for these reviews, I refuse to rewatch, and that is the paper cuts. I hate that stunt with a passion. I cannot stand rewatching it. It is the only one which I cannot rewatch. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. And it's just so cringe-inducing. And like, it's funny because I can watch the Yellow Snow Cone, I can watch like the Poo Cocktail Supreme, etc., and be fine. But the paper cuts, I cannot stand. Overall, it's a decent watch. I mean, I think if you're a Jackass fan, this is definitely something to watch. I don't think you should necessarily skip the first movie and just go straight for the others because they're far better. I mean, yes, they are far better, but I think this is still a decent watch. It's interesting to see like how the movies would evolve from this, how they would make themselves better. Jackass Number Two is often cited by a lot of people, a lot of fans, to be the best Jackass movie because, let's be honest now, Jackass Number Two saw the flaws of the first film and just upped the ante to perhaps its most extreme. And to be fair, Jackass Number Two was released at probably the golden age of Jackass, if that makes sense. This is when Jackass was at its height. You had Wild Boys, you had Viva La Bam, you had the video game being released, you had the 24-hour takeover, etc., etc. Like, this was Jackass at its height, and you can very much tell how much it improved from the previous film. Jackass Number Two isn't my favorite Jackass film. I'm going to say that right now. I do think that people have overrated it a little bit, and maybe it's my fault for rewatching it too many times. Maybe it's, upon reflection, and there are certain other things which I'll get into, which have kind of dampened the spirit of Jackass Number Two for me. But I still think this is a fantastic film. Like, whereas Jackass Number One is probably like a 5 out of 10, this is like an 8 out of 10. This is a massive improvement over the first. Like, even the first stunt, which admittingly isn't as wild as, say, the rent-a-car crash-up derby, but it's hilarious. It's fantastic. The puppet show, and then it continues with the Valentines, which is just funny, and then you have the fire hose rodeo, which is a more extreme stunt, and everything in this movie feels like it's at a much higher level, a much higher playing field. You have the Toro Tosser, which I think has a very interesting backstory, which is that Johnny Knoxville's cousin, who owns the ranch, which you see in pretty much all the films with the bulls and what have you, he actually showed off the Toro Tosser, and the Toro Tosser was actually meant to be Toro Totter. The Toro Totter was meant to be was literally just a last minute stunt, and it ends up being one of the best stunts in the movie, or at least in my opinion. Even like little things like when Ryan Dunn is running away from the bulls and he just collapses on the ground and he's exhausted after being basically gored by one of the bulls, and he lies down, he pops the balloons and spooks himself. It's so hilarious. And that's the thing, this film is hilarious as well as entertaining with the stunts. Once again, when I was rewatching it with other people, this one had a lot of laughs, and in fact I think this one had more laughs than any of the other films. So I must be the odd one out when I say that this isn't my favourite Jackass film. I think Jackass 3D, in my personal opinion, is the best. Even when I was looking at an online poll, like Jackass Number 2 led by like 1,300, whereas The second place, which was Jackass 3D, was only at like 600 votes. It was insane to see how popular this is. I believe even Steve-O says this is his favorite as well. Jackass Number Two, like I said, it ups the ante. Everything is at its best, really, and it is entertaining. However, and this is why I sort of find it a little bit overrated, why, unfortunately, there are a lot of problems that this movie has. For one thing, Jackass Number Two has, how do I put it, has some stunts or skits that didn't really need to be in there. For example, did we really need Dave England's big green ball? Did we really need Wee Man, interrupting this meeting and walking on top of the table completely naked? Did we really need that? In my opinion, some of this could have been cut down. And in 2.5, we see one particular stunt which I think should have been in this film and would have elevated this film, certainly. But obviously that's be in 2.5 when I speak about it. Not only that, but if, once again, with 2.5 actually speaking about it, this film, let's be honest, this film was a Wild Boys project that ended up becoming a film. It was literally just made up on the spot in a weird way. It does have a brilliant opening, this does, this film. I will point this out. The opening for this is fantastic with the bulls chasing them through the neighborhood. But with this film, it's like, how do I put it? It's like, because of the fact that they were filming for Wild Boys, you can tell that a lot of scenes were filmed for Wild Boys. Like, there's a moment, or there's a lot of moments are set in India, and you can tell they were Wild Boys sketches that just happened to be put onto film. And also the infamous, Chris Pontius drinking the horse sperm sketch, or How to Milk a Horse. That, if you couldn't tell, is a Wild Boys set, which we see in Wild Boys. There's actually a lot of things in Wild Boys that end up crossing over to this film. And that's not to say Wild Boys is bad, because Wild Boys is fantastic. I absolutely love Wild Boys. But it does come as a bit of a distraction, and, it doesn't feel as jackassy as it should be. It feels more like Wild Boys, the movie, as opposed to Jackass Number Two. But the final thing that kind of has dampened my spirit for Jackass Number Two, why I've not necessarily, reflected on it and seen it as a worse film, because it is still a great film. I still absolutely love it. I think it's fantastic. It's my second favorite of the Jackass movies. But the reason why, upon reflection, it has gone down for me is the final stunt. The final stunt, which is the terror taxi, which is absolutely hilarious. So why do I have a problem with it? Well, Erin McGeehee has revealed that stunt was staged. And upon finding that out, and upon him making these revelations, it kind of ruins the joke. It kind of ruins it in a way. Basically, Erin McGeehee made up the idea years ago, and it never got made up. And then someone on the production team literally told him that they're going to do something that is one of his old ideas, and he actually went through it and discovered what it was. He knew that it was an actor. He knew it was a setup. As a result, the fear and the panicking from him is nothing more than staged. And it really ruins what is a brilliant skit. And that's not to say not everything was staged. Like, apparently the pubic hair was real, and it was, something that he didn't expect, and it was disgusting. But at the same time, it does ruin what is a brilliant sketch. And it's a shame, because I used to consider that to be one of my favorite sketches in Jackass. But after those revelations, it kind of ruined it for me in a way. Now, obviously, this could be Erin McGeehee, trying to save face all these years later. But I don't know. It's one of those things where, why would he lie about it? That said, the actual ending of Jackass Number Two is phenomenal. Like, if I were to rank, like, the beginnings and openings, like, Jackass Number Two has a fantastic opening, but the ending is probably my favorite ending out of all the Jackass movies. The big musical number where they all do like their own individual stunts, which reflects onto their personalities. It's just fantastic. I absolutely love it. And Jackass Number Two really upped the ante. It really upped the budget. It really showed what Jackass could be about, what it can do with, well, a bigger budget, with more effort put into it, and straying away from trying to be too safe, which is the problem which Jackass Number One had. Like I said, all my negative problems are mostly nitpicks, aside from the, obviously, Aaron McGehee revelations years later. But overall, this is a fantastic movie, but it isn't my favourite movie. I do think Jackass Number 3 is better. Before we get on to Jackass 3D, we actually have Jackass 2.5. Jackass 2.5 was unique because this is the first 0.5. Basically, whereas the first Jackass film, they barely filmed that much, and as a result, they just basically put most of the film, or most of the footage on the film, save for the ending, which was heavily cut out, which is kind of a shame. But with Jackass 2.5, it's revealed that basically they did 3 films worth of Jackass, as Jeff Tremaine pointed out. Basically, as a result, there's this behind-the-scenes sort of movie about how they made Jackass 2 and like what got cut out and why it got cut out. And I really like that idea. I really like the idea of looking behind the scenes of a Jackass movie, and I think this does a good job at it. However, at the same time, this is an incredibly short Jackass movie. It's only around 60 minutes long, which is only an hour. That's only an hour. Compared to the normal Jackass movies, which are 90 minutes long, and even Bad Grandpa 0.5, which is 90 minutes long itself, it does feel very, very short. That said, I do think some of the cut ideas are very interesting, and in a way they could have worked had they had been tweaked out, had they been more carefully thought out, if that makes sense. For example, the King Kong sketch is pretty funny, all things considered, but obviously Preston has a fear of heights, and of course the production wasn't really considerate of what they could do with it, and I feel like that could have been much better. It would have been made for a great stunt, if that makes sense. The same goes for the dizzy boxing, and once again, a great idea, but once again, production didn't really think it through that well, and instead of it being cranes swinging around, it's office chairs, and it's not as spectacular as it could have been. It's through 2.5 that you find out why a lot of these stunts are set in like India and why it feels very Wild Boysy, and it's because, it was because Jackass Number 2 came out because of Johnny Knoxville being with the Wild Boys and coming up with that revelation that they should make another Jackass movie. And it's quite interesting hearing that. And it's also interesting knowing like how much Jeff Tremaine really wanted to force in a lot of these Wild Boy ideas into Jackass Number 2, to the point that the crew actually got fed up with him and told him not to do any more. It's with the Agori tribe in particular, which they just decided they had enough, the Wild Boy stuff, which is very interesting insight in my opinion. I really like that behind the scenes ideas. However, there is a little bit of an issue. Jackass Number 2, the DVD, actually had behind the scenes stuff, and it also had deleted scenes, a lot of it which, let's be honest now, didn't really need to be made if they're doing a 2.5. But 2.5 still offers a lot of interesting points, and perhaps the most interesting point, and this is one stunt which I don't know why for the life of me they cut out, and it's the obstacle course. Why the fuck did they take this out? This is such a brilliant stunt, and it's such a brilliant moment in 2.5 that it makes you wonder why they didn't just add that in, and why did they add that? Why did they add in the wee man walking in naked, or the big green ball, and this stunt was cut out? Like, it baffles my mind. And I know that Spike and Jeff Tremaine are the two that decide what goes in, what goes out, but my God, this is such a great one. Basically, for those that have not seen it, all the Jackass crew are dressed up in prisoner gear, and they have to first go under some barbed wire with a bunch of alligators and a bunch of pigs. And so that's going to, cause a lot of pain. After that, they get tarred and feathered. And they have to keep ducking, going into tunnels and all that, and then they get shot up by professional paintballers, and it's just brutal. And the ending is just horrific because they have to drink a bunch of drink shots of spit, which is just horrible to think about. It's an absolutely horrific stunt, but it's also just so much fun, and like it is such a great stunt that I do not understand the thought process of cutting that out, but then keeping Big Green Ball or Naked Wee Man in. Like it just baffles me. But what's even weird is that there's no actual explanation why that one got cut out. Like the others, there was some sort of explanation, some sort of revelation as to why it was cut out. But this one, there was none. And that kind of bothers me in a bit. But it is interesting seeing the insight of what goes into making the films and what happens as a result of making the films. Overall, 2.5 is a great watch. However, it is incredibly short, and maybe it could have just been a deleted scenes or behind the scenes, as opposed to its own movie. I don't know. Jackass 3D is, in my opinion, the best Jackass film. And the reason why is because, unlike Jackass Number Two, where there were a few, hiccups, for me, Jackass 3D has no hiccups. Every single stunt, every single skit works, and everything is just phenomenal. The opening, when you have all the Jackass crew in costume and they're all stood by one colour of the rainbow and they all get injured in some way, is absolutely fantastic. In my opinion, it really shows the personalities of all the Jackass crew, and it really does so in a humorously brutal way. And like I said, all the stunts in this film work. You got the high five, which is the first prank, I should say, which is just a funny prank to watch. It's sort of like an evolution to the Valentines, which, the Valentines is funny, but this is like even bigger and even funnier. And I think that's the thing about Jackass 3D. It's a film that goes even bigger than Jackass Number Two. And in my opinion, while Jackass Number Two is like an 8 out of 10, this is a 9 out of 10. This is by far just a major improvement over the previous film, and a major improvement over all the films, in fact. And I can see a lot of people, they seem like over the recent years, it's not, wasn't at the time for sure, but recently, and I think this is mostly because of what Steve-O has said before, because apparently Steve-O was still coming off of drugs by this point, and he was sort of out of it, which is probably why he didn't enjoy it. But of course, you know what people on the internet are like. They have to follow the people that they love the most. They have to follow them like good little sheep. And I have heard some recent criticisms these past few, years that, Jackass 3D is nothing more than an experimental film, because let's be honest now, it's a gimmicky film with 3D and obviously the Phantom Cam. However, and this is a big however, I have never seen this film in 3D, and I think it's fantastic. I don't think having it in 3D would necessarily take it away. And the Phantom Cam is a fantastic addition to Jackass. Surely you would want Jackass to evolve, and that's what Jackass 3D, in my opinion, does. It evolves Jackass from Jackass Number Two to this. Everything is on a much grander scale, and this is what I like. I prefer the more grander scale stuff over the smaller scale crap. And like I said, even the weaker stuff like the gorilla in the hotel room or the apple in my ass, they're still funny. They're still got great moments. I can still remember bits of dialogue or scenes that happened in them. Like, Phil, for example, Phil Margera, running into the bathroom, literally shitting himself over Chris Pontius dressed up as a gorilla, or in the apple in my ass when Wee Man gets a perfect, I say Wee Man, Jeff gets a perfect direct shot on Wee Man's crotch when he throws an apple, and Johnny Knoxville's quote that, "See, Bob, it's not that hard to be in a film." It's just funny. It is funny from beginning to end, and it's just fantastic. And even the more disgusting stunts are impressively disgusting, if that makes sense. Like the volcano, which is just horrific, but it's actually impressively horrific. And of course the poo cocktail supreme, which is, in my opinion, of all the final stunts, because obviously the terror taxi is staged, and I have my opinion on it has dipped, unfortunately, because of that. Of all the final stunts, the big send-offs, this is the best one. Even, like, if we ignore the stagedness of the Terror Taxi, this is still better than that. I think this is just such a great stunt. And I think, who was it? It was Chris Pontius who, like, says at the end, like, the stunt has everything. You know, I agree with him. Like, this stunt really does have everything. It's disgusting. It's extreme. It's, you know, got vomit. It's got, you know, it's got everything. It's just got everything, and it is fantastic. You know, everything about it is just brilliant. And I know some people are a little bit upset that it doesn't go to different countries like the previous films, but honestly, I think that's for the better, because honestly, the other country stuff in the previous films were probably the less impressive things. Like the stuff in Japan in the first one wasn't very interesting. The stuff in India was slightly more interesting, but still wasn't as impressive as it could have been. Like, everything about this film is just great. Like, there's no moment where you feel bored watching it, and that's the problem with Jackass Number Two. It sometimes felt like it dipped a little bit every time it went to a lesser stunt. Whereas this one, there's no moment where you feel bored, where you feel, you know, tired of watching it. You just have to keep watching it. It's just so much fun. You know, the tooth pull with the Lamborghini is just a brutal stunt, but it's a hilarious one at that. There are two versions of this film. There is a theatrical cut and there's a director cut. And in my opinion, the director's cut is much better. It does a much more, it has extensions to a lot of the scenes. For example, the Super Mighty Glue. If you watch the theatrical cut actually heavily cuts that one, because, for example, if you look closely on the theatrical cut, you'll notice that Ryan Dunn's beard has got stuff all over it. If you watch the director's cut, you find out why it has stuff all over it, because Bam actually grabbed his beard with the glue, and it's such a great moment. Like, I find this more memorable than the previous film, if I'm perfectly honest, because there are some moments in Jackass Number Two which I do sort of forget about, and I completely forgot about when I was rewatching it. Whereas this one, I remember mostly all of it. Even some of the dialogue I remembered, you know. I think this is a fantastic movie. Like, I genuinely think this is the best of all the mainstream Jackass films. Jackass 3D, absolutely fantastic. And I don't care what everyone says about the gimmickiness of it. I think the gimmicks work. I think the Phantom Cam in particular is a fantastic addition to Jackass. And I think it really works, especially when you see the impacts of, like, say, for example, like a paintball bellet or the, dildo in the face. It just, see the face rocket side to side. It's just fantastic. I love this film. I really, really love this film. Jackass 3.5 is considered by many to be the best of the 0.5s, and I can see why. It's a lot of the cut stunts are really good, and I think that's a testament to just how good 3D really was. Whereas, 2.5, you can tell that the stunts were there, but they just weren't, produced well, if that makes sense. But it also gives an insight to some of the behind the scenes, like 2.5, such as the Phantom Cam, the reasons for it, and the testing they did, such as throwing a tennis ball at Wee Man's balls, which is absolutely horrific to think about, but it's just fun. The opening is also a lot more fun and a lot more extravagant compared to the 2.5 opening, where they're all soldiers. Here they're running through Europe for their tour, and it's just a great opening. Like 3.5 is just a fantastic movie. There's not really much to say. I will say this though, I do sort of miss a lot of the behind the scenes aspects. Like, I know they talk about the Phantom Cam and what motivated them to use it and why it was such a great tool. However, I feel like it missed out a huge opportunity talking about some of the stunts that didn't work, because they sort of just show the stunts, but they don't talk about it that much, I feel like 3.5 does suffer from the lack of behind-the-scenes insight, which I think it was kind of interesting in 2.5. 3.5, still a very good movie, still a fantastic movie, and honestly, I kind of want to see if someone would ever, in their right mind, go through 3D and 3.5 and sort of combine them into one long movie, because that would be basically the greatest Jackass movie ever made, let's be honest now. Or maybe, it's just like everything works in this, and I think one of the funniest segments in 3.5, and this is because this is when they're talking about like on sets, when they're talking about how tense it can get. And the funniest moment has to be when Danger Aaron, he's obviously been rockied by Bam Margera, and he wants revenge, and he stands behind a chain-linked fence, a chain-linked fence which you can see through, holding this big stick with a boxing glove on the end, ready to pounce on, Bam. And of course, Bam can see him very easily, and of course, the way he's describing it to Ryan, who is like almost in tears laughing at it, it's such a great moment. And, obviously it wouldn't have made the film, but that is just hilarious. Like, without a doubt, that is hilarious. And, I will admit a lot of the deleted scenes in this is just really good, but I think that's a testament to just how good 3D really was. Whereas, number two, like I said, the deleted scenes or the deleted stunts there are deleted for a very good reason. Then mostly not as impressive, or they were good ideas but poorly executed, if that makes sense. Whereas this is good ideas which surprisingly never made the cut, or just didn't make the cut because the others were just too good, if that makes sense. Jackass Bad Grandpa. It is the first spin-off film of the Jackass movies. I mean, well, okay, if you count the 0.5s, it's actually the third spin-off. It's the first, which is to not feature any of the Jackass members other than Johnny Knoxville and arguably Spike, but he didn't really make it in the final cut. Bad Grandpa takes the old man sketch, which has been present throughout all of Jackass, even in the TV show, and it elevates it to its most extreme, where he's just going about with his grandson in a scripted story set in reality, if that makes sense. So he's going with his grandson to basically dump his wife's body by the river because that's where she wanted to be laid to rest, and it's his son is going to be taken to his father, and his father is this asshole character, while his daughter, his grandson's mother is just a deadbeat alcoholic, druggie, and all that. And I do love seeing this sort of scripted, let's be honest now, stereotypical Hollywood story being set in reality, and you see just the reactions of real people, and it's just fantastic. Because this is something I kind of forgot about with the 3D segment on this video, and that is, I did sort of forget to mention that I did think the old man stuff in 3D was probably the weakest of all the films. That is one flaw which I will give it. It has a really weak old man segment. However, it is made up by the old man in this, which is just fantastic, Irving Zisman. It really is just a scripted story, basically set in reality, and of course, for me, this is the funniest Jackass film. Whereas 3D is my favorite Jackass film overall, if I was to rank it by humor, this is S tier. This is the best in my opinion. From beginning to end, I am laughing my head off watching this. It is just phenomenal. Everything is fantastic. And I think it's made up for the fact that you see these people and their real reactions. They're really like watching this insane old man do these things. Perhaps the best parts of this film has to be the penguin guy. The penguin guy, whose real name was called George. So essentially Irving drives over and hits the penguin, this like statue penguin in front of this store, and this guy walks out and he just yells at him, and they get in this argument. It's just hilarious. And of course the final skit, which is absolutely phenomenal. We all know about how pedophilic those American child modeling, pageant shows are. We all know how messed up those ones are. And so what they do is they take the piss out of it, and they take the piss out of it brilliantly by having Irving get his grandson in the competition to win some money, obviously. And it starts off normal. It starts off as, stereotypical, and then and then he does this like striptease, and it shocks everyone there, and because everything comes out with some money. It is such a hilarious ending, and it is that is just phenomenal. Like I said, this is the funniest of all the Jackass movies. Obviously, it's a spin-off. It's not really part of the mainstream film, so I don't really count it in that segment, if that makes sense. But of all the spin-off films, this is the best by a long shot. Which brings me on to Bad Grandpa Point 5, which is currently the lowest rated of all the Jackass movies. Like, this one, for some reason, loads of people hate this one. Like a lot of people don't like Bad Grandpa Point 5. They think that it is a waste of time. They think it is boring. And I can sort of see why. I remember when I first watched it, I was kind of bored by it. It wasn't as interesting as, say, 2.5 or 3.5, which, which were far more entertaining, and hell, it definitely isn't as interesting as Bad Grandpa itself, which is hilarious as fuck. But, and this is a big but, I do really like the fact that this is a proper behind the scenes look into Bad Grandpa, or look into a Jackass movie. Basically you have, insight of what the story was going to be and what had to be changed. Like, for example, Spike was meant to have a much larger role in this. He was going to be the wife, he was going to be the old lady, and he's going to actually appear for a bit before, obviously, she dies. There's also going to be a segment, like, at the beginning where everything is on a golf course and he's just pissing about and annoying people. And that was actually used as test footage as well to see, like, how well they can get people to, how much they can piss people off. It goes into insight of, like, some of the sketches that just didn't make it. For example, Johnny Knoxville really loved the Old Man Balls from number 2 and wanted to bring it back. And they tried doing a sketch involving, him ordering pizza or something like that. And, the balls were going to be obviously shown, but no one reacted to it. And they kept doing it multiple times. And eventually called someone, and the person immediately recognized it was Johnny Knoxville, which is kind of funny, all things considered. It is interesting seeing that. However, I can understand why some people don't like it, why some people find it very boring. It is, unlike the other point fives where they just show off the sketch, and they do in many ways cut it down a bit to get to the point. This one pretty much shows most of the sketch, and it's very long, and you can tell why this got cut, because it just isn't as entertaining or isn't as funny. And you can tell this was, on the cutting room floor for a reason. And I can understand why people really don't like that aspect. But at the same time, I think this is really interesting in terms of the behind the scenes. I think this does the best job in terms of looking behind the scenes of how they make the movies and how they do it. Like, I think it's interesting talking about, like, the makeup's evolution. Like, in the Jackass TV series, the makeup was pretty piss poor. It was nothing more than just a mask and a wig. Then, the first movie came around, it was a little bit better. Second movie, much better. Third movie, even better. And then this movie, it's just phenomenal, and to the point that they almost got nominated, or they did get nominated, I should say, for an Academy Award, which is absolutely fantastic to think about. If you really think about it, Bad Grandpa is a Oscar-nominated movie, which is hilarious to think about. Like I said, I think, I must admit, when I was rewatching it for these reviews, Bad Grandpa Point 5 was one that actually, in my opinion, elevated a bit, whereas number 2 sort of went down a bit, in my opinion. This went a lot more higher, and I actually think this is much better than a lot of people give it credit for. I can understand why people think it might be a bit boring, because it does drag on a bit, and it is the longest of the point fives. Out of all the point fives, this is the longest, at over like an hour and 40 minutes, I believe. But it's really interesting looking at the behind the scenes, even if I guess you could say it could maybe, have been, a behind-the-scenes feature on the DVD. I don't know. Like, I'm just saying. Although maybe it was too long for that. Overall, fantastic. I really do like this. I think it's a really interesting insight. However, it isn't as entertaining as, say, the movie itself or the other point fives. A lot of the sketches they were cut for a very good reason, if that makes sense. They just weren't that funny. They just weren't that great. Jackass Forever had a very troubled production, to say the very least. So it started production and then pretty much got shut down immediately because coronavirus happened. And then when it restarted again, Steve-O and Johnny Knoxville got badly injured and were out of action for 2 weeks. And then after that, you had Bam Margera going off the deep end and having to be kicked off set for very good reasons. This had a very troubled production, and I must admit, seeing the production hell that was Jackass Forever, I genuinely did not think this film was going to be as good as the others. And to be fair, it is better than the first film, but it's not as good as number 2 or 3. Those two are too good to be overlapped, if that makes sense. But it is surprisingly a really good movie. Jackass Forever obviously features most of the Jackass crew. Obviously, Ryan Dunn sadly passed away after Jackass 3D in a car crash, while Bam Margera, like I said earlier, went off the deep end. Because of his drug abuse. And this film obviously features new cast members, and I'll get onto the cast members in a second, because I think overall, Jackass Forever is a really good movie, and it's a surprisingly good movie. A lot of the stunts are very enjoyable, and, like the bull stunt, for example, the magic trick, and even the musical chairs and all that. I love the Quiet Game, and I love the Dum Dum Game. They're just simple, fun games that are just hilarious and also painful at the exact same time. There's a lot in this movie that I really like, and I like that they brought back some of the older sketches, such as the cup test, which is, in this movie, has probably one of the worst injuries ever. Oh boy, I feel bad for Danger Aaron. Danger Aaron is the real MVP of this movie. He goes through so much shit in this. But it's great nonetheless. But he suffers one of the worst injuries ever, which is this pogo stick that hits the cup, but it actually cuts his balls. And what's really funny is that he had a kid around the time this film was being made. He didn't tell anyone, and they just abused his testicles so much in this. This is a funny film, and it's a really wholesome film in a weird way. The Silence of the Lambs is another really great sketch in this. It's funny as fuck. It's not, like I said, it's not as good as number 2 or number 3. Those ones are just too good. I don't know how you're going to overlap those two, but it is still a really good film, and it's phenomenal how much they were able to accomplish given how bad the production was. But like I said earlier, there are some new members in this. There's 4 in particular, and 3 of the 4 are really good. One of them, not so much. You got Zach, who's an obese man, and he actually did appear in his own show, and I first saw him on a Steve-O video where he jumped into some cactuses and got injured badly. And Zach, he's the type of guy that does the more extreme, more brutal stunts compared to the others. And, he was a lot of fun. Jasper is sort of like Chris Pontius in the sense that he's more of the jokester. He's more the guy that's just playing around, but he will get involved in some of the stunts as well. I thought he was a very, very great addition to this team. But Poopies is probably the best of them all. He does anything. He's funny. He's also does anything. He's also got that, dare I say, lack of intelligence, which makes him also pretty humorous to watch. Poopies is great. The first time I saw him and Jasper was on the Shark Week special, which wasn't available in the UK, but it was available on YouTube, which, yes, I did watch it that way. And that's when he got bitten by a shark. And Jasper and Poopies are fantastic. The one which I don't think did very well, and that's Rachel Wolfson. She appears in a total, I believe, 5 of the stunts and only actually participates in 2 of them. That's the Silent Game, or the Quiet Game, I should say, and the Scorpion Botox. And the Quiet Game is great as a whole, but she's immediately outclassed by Poopies and Steve-O, who do a much better job, in my opinion. Even if Steve-O did fail the Quiet Game in a really humorous way. But then you got Scorpion Botox, which it feels like a lesser version of the Pontius the Barbarian, which was a much funnier moment, especially because Pontius is much more charismatic, whereas Rachel didn't really come across as charismatic that much. And all the other appearances she has is more or less reserved as a background, or in the Old Man sketch, she's pretending to be, Irving Zisman's granddaughter. Honestly, she felt like the least impressive and the least needed of the new crew. She felt more like a guest star, if that makes sense. And I wouldn't make such a bad fuss about this if it wasn't for the fact that she was also the one who happened to have the most interviews and was promoted as the first female Jackass star, even though she technically isn't, if you've ever bothered watching the original Jackass series. And all that, and yet she doesn't do anything in this. She feels more like a guest star than an actual member. And what's even more insulting is that Jasper barely got any advertising, barely got anything, and yet he does a lot more and was a lot more funnier, in my opinion. So yeah, in my opinion, out of the new crew, 3 of them are great, 1 of them not so great. I'm sure in 4.5 there's probably a lot of deleted scenes which might elevate my opinion, but at the moment, not so much. And this brings me on to a bit of a flaw, which I will admit that Jackass Forever has, and that is Jackass Forever was a very good film and still impressive, knowing what they were able to accomplish, feels very, very tight. It feels very small-scaled, if that makes sense. This could be obviously blamed on the pandemic for obvious reasons, but stunts like the musical chairs, for example, only has 4 people on it. And I feel like that could be much better if there was more people, in my opinion. Not only that, but there's a lot of stunts that feel like they were cut out. And I'm assuming they were cut out because of Bam Margera. For example, the marching band actually does have Bam Margera in it. And you can actually see him multiple times going on the treadmill and, afterwards, once Steve was knocked out and you see him actually get up. Maybe, just maybe, the reason why a lot of these stunts feel very sudden and very heavily cut is because of that. Because there's one which is Jackass, which is where Zach jumps into a bunch of cactuses, and this is on one of the posters, and this is in trailers, and yet the stunt feels awkwardly edited, if that makes sense. It feels very awkwardly edited and feels like it's been rushed forward, and it doesn't feel like it's as impactful as it should have been compared to other Jackass movies, which would have lingered a bit more and would have paid more attention to it. Like I said, a lot of stunts feel very small scaled, and this is even more evident with the final stunt. The final stunt, which is the Vomitron, which a lot of people have really criticized the finale of this film. The Vomitron could have worked if it was on a much bigger scale, but instead it's only 5 of them: Steve-O, Dave England, Jasper, Zach, and Poopies. They're the only ones on it, and sure, Wee Man and Johnny Knoxville pop out to shoot them with paintballs and what have you, but I don't know, I feel like that could have been much more grander, if that makes sense. And that's the problem. This film feels kind of laid back a bit. And obviously they are getting on now, the Jackass crew. They are much older, and I'm still amazed they can steal some of this stuff, and it is still hilarious, but it very much feels small scaled, and it feels like a lot of it was cut out. I don't know whether other people have felt that way, but it feels very much like half of the movie is missing. I know that might sound really strange, but it feels like that. And I am interested in what 4.5 offers, because if that shows off some stuff which may or may not prove some of my points, it might say a lot. It might also be the reason why Rachel doesn't really appear that much, despite the fact that she was heavily advertised and even heavily interviewed, more so than some of the others. I don't know. That's just the way I see it. But overall, Jackass Forever is a phenomenal piece of work, and I really do enjoy it, even if it is a bit too small scale. But then again, I have to, I and other people have to remember it is the pandemic. It was the pandemic, I should say. And, things were, a lot more restricted, if that makes sense. That said, I still enjoyed this movie a lot, and I am interested in what 4.5 has to offer. Even despite the production hell, this is still a really good piece of work. I will say this, though. Jackass Forever does have the best opening of all the Jackass films. This actually beats out Jackass 3D, in my opinion, in terms of the opening, which is the Pontosaurus Rex, which is basically a Godzilla ripoff, and it's just a fantastic opening. But even that has like a slight awkward edit where awkwardly comes out to show Chris Pontius to give him his name tag and all that. I don't know, they could have like done something a little bit better to keep it within like the more scaled world, and then revealed it to be elaborate set when the turtle comes out and bites his penis. I don't know, I felt like it could have worked a lot better, but nonetheless, I absolutely love this opening. It's probably my favorite of all the openings, in my opinion. But yeah, Jackass Forever was a surprising good movie, especially given the production hell. And I say that is it for the time being. I didn't talk about Bad Trip, because Bad Trip, some people have argued, is a Jackass movie, because it is basically the same as Bad Grandpa in the sense that it's a scripted story, but a scripted story is played out in the real world, and so people having real reactions to these absurd and bizarre scenarios. I do like Bad Trip. I will say that's very quickly. I do like Bad Trip. It's not as good or as funny as Bad Grandpa, though. Bad Grandpa is far better, like a million times better, but it is still funny, and obviously Eric Andre is fantastic. I love Eric Andre. I hope you enjoyed this video. I don't know whether you agree or maybe you disagree. I'm sure some people might disagree with the Jackass Number Two criticisms I gave, even though I do really love that film. I should stress that out. Just because I have nitpicks doesn't mean I hate the film. But nonetheless, do you agree? Do you disagree? What's your thoughts on all the Jackass movies, including the 0.5s? Do you think that 4.5 is hiding a lot of content from Forever? I think it might do. Hope to see you next time, and yeah, bye.